Okay, so this video is going to be discussing the different boundaries that an atheist can have in their life with Christians, Muslims, or with just anyone. And this can apply to like Christians and Muslims as well, or in the boundaries that they have with other religions and atheists, or basically anybody you have ideological differences with. It's more of a relationship and boundaries video really than it is a Christian atheist video. But before I get into that, I wanted to quickly just mention something about my audio. I will be getting a new microphone soon. I just have to find the right one that is a fit for this camera. That's why I'm filming in all these different places in my apartment currently, because I'm trying to find a place where my current camera can get at least some audio reception. But anyways, moving on from that, back to the topic at hand. There's three areas that I think, that you have to three just general categories to look at relationships and, how it relates to people with different viewpoints than yours. One is coworkers, the other is casual friends and familial relationships, and the third are close friends and familial relationships or like a spouse. And there's three very different dynamics to, I think, how you have to deal with people with major ideological differences in yourself in any of these three categories. The first being coworkers. Now this is honestly, I think where you can be the most compromising and flexible of having people with different views than yours. There's really only one red line in the workforce, and that is people cannot make it a direct issue at the office. And as an atheist, I haven't yet really encountered that. I had a lady at my former job who did harass me a little about being an atheist, even though I never once brought it up in the office. And FYI, I think that is the best policy in general, unless, of course, you work at a church or something, where you should just not bring up either religion or atheism or anything like that, directly in the office, because it's not, your place to try to push your views onto other people. But I actually, years ago, when I was working as a bank teller back in college and I was still a Christian, had a situation that could have been something that was an issue like that, though. I had a boss that was a part-time youth pastor, and he actually did kind of informally make it part of people's job requirements that they go to his group if they could. And he never, of course, forced anyone, but he would, mention that they were having different services, and he would try to pressure people. And it was kind of a soft abuse of his power, really. And back then it wasn't a huge issue for me, though, because I was in college and he knew that I couldn't go because I was studying in my spare time. And he also knew that I was a Christian at that time, so he didn't have any problem with me directly, if I had been an atheist. But he actually it did factor into people's favoritism in terms of, and how they were treated in the office, by how well they responded to the topic of religion. So there was one area I did encounter it a little bit, probably worse than in any other job role, but it wasn't a huge issue for me there. But moving on, that's just kind of the way I see workforce issues, is that it's just, if it's made an issue about your job performance, then you should make it an issue back the other way, or maybe find a new job. And, like I said, that can apply to Christians too, with an atheist boss that's harassing you. But moving to the next category, it's a little trickier then with the next category because, casual friends and familial relationships, you can have a pretty wide variety of differences. Since these are people who you're probably not going to be seen and talking to every day, but you may talk to them once a week or once a month, or at least see them a few times a year. And for me, this is where thus far, I've run into the trickiest areas thus far because, and I think I've kind of had to learn the most here because I've learned that you can actually have still very friendly, casual relationships with people who are different than yourself, Or, one other example would be people on YouTube. I have people that comment on this channel that are not necessarily atheists, and I don't have a problem with a lot of their views. But, there are a few red lines, though, that have to be respected in this regard. And that is that the atheist or Christian cannot try to force the other person to switch from their views. Or they can't make violent threats against them, or they can't just say terrible, terrible things to them and then expect to still be on friendly terms. And most people, like my former Bible teacher, who's a hardcore fundamentalist, and a handful of other familial relationships I have that are fairly religious. Most of these people have done an okay job of respecting that boundary. In fact, I've been pretty surprised for the most part, and it's kind of shown me, it's just kind of shown me a little bit about, how many people actually think secular, even if they identify as religious. However, there was one relationship I did encounter a major issue with on this. And, not to get overly personal, but it was my parents. It was, when I told them I was an atheist, I just did it exactly how you're supposed to. In all atheist coming out videos and everything I've ever heard, I sent them a written email, which I just explained that, I'm an atheist, and for blah, blah, blah reasons, I don't expect you to change, but I expect you to leave me alone, and that I don't expect to bring this up any further. Well, I kind of wish that my parents had just gotten angry and responded in the moment, but unfortunately, they had an even worse reaction. They decided that they were just going, my dad in particular, because he actually deleted my mom's email. She didn't get it for 2 years later. He decided he was going to try to manipulate me back into the fold and just get me to pretend to be a Christian. And so what his strategy was just to get more and more hostile to me over the next couple of years, gradually, until finally when I was going to go to a memorial service for another relative, he decided he couldn't wait any longer. So then he just decided he was just going to tell me, okay, you can be an atheist, but you have to pretend to be a Christian, you have to lie, and also if you don't, you're not going to be in the will and trust anymore. Also, if you don't, it'll kill and embarrass us, and just a bunch of other things that were just really stupid and nasty. And that is, honestly, that's a red line for me. And, I think that would be perfectly appropriate the other way around, too, if I ever told my parents when I was an atheist that, you have to convert to be an atheist, you can't go to church anymore, because I'm just so embarrassed to have such stupid bigots as you as parents. Well, that's acceptable to say that, no, you just can't do that, and if you can't accept it, then we need to just kind of step away from each other. And that would go for friends or just, a lot of different people, maybe a person you're casually dating or whatever, And one thing I wanted to relate to this kind of quickly, where I kind of gave me the idea to make this video was a video that I attached the link to below, where a lesbian couple had this issue kind of in a similar way with their religious parents. And they said that basically, we don't expect you to change your views on LGBTQ rights. We don't expect you to support it, but you do have to just leave us alone and accept that, we're married. And they said, no way. And they said, we refuse to ever see your partner or associate with them. Well, that's the contingent of being in a relationship with us. And that's not acceptable, And her parents actually had to go their separate ways. And I think that actually was probably the best thing in that circumstance, because you cannot have somebody that does not respect major boundaries in your life, But, luckily for me, with my parents, it did not quite get that bad, and they did back down. And even though there's been tension since then, it kind of diffused. But it was very hard, to handle it that way. And let me put it this way, I don't know. I would recommend, let me put it this way, I would recommend trying to avoid that situation as much as possible, because it is quite stressful. But, moving on then, to the last category, close relationships, like, a family member that you see every day, or a spouse, or a friend who you are extremely close with and have been for a long time. These are people who you have to have at least some common ground with. And that's not, to be snooty or to be mean, but, if you're, and this applies to anything, if you basically think that religion causes most of the problems in life and they think religion can solve most of the problems in life, I guarantee you that's going to lead to a conflict of interest on something sooner or later. And that would go for an extreme liberal with an extreme conservative, or an Occupy Wall Street protester with somebody who works on Wall Street. There's got to be some level of commonplace, views between you, with, in order for you to coexist. Because you're going, when you're very intricately interwoven with another person, in order to move forward in life, you have to be able to share common goals. And you aren't going to be able to have common goals with somebody who you don't actually have even a remotely similar worldview to. So that's what I would say is the only area of relationship in your life as an atheist or a Christian that you have to be a little bit more discerning about who you can and cannot have connections with. But those are just at least the way I would kind of generalize the different relationships and how you handle them at the moment. Of course, you know, this is just from my own life experience. I'm only 31 and I have a very limited amount of life experience. But I think, you know, I have enough to at least gain some moderately good perspectives on this. But as usual, you know, if you have a different opinion or perspective, feel free to voice it in the comments section below. And other than that, just thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.